Welcome to the Journal Paper Writing Club. In this video I'm going to show you how you can write a good abstract, what key sentences should form part of your abstract, and how you can use your draft paper to help you write your abstract more quickly. We will also be looking at how to edit your own writing. So let's get started. Why should you write an abstract? Well, an abstract provides a concise overview of your paper. It is also used sometimes to summarize other pieces of work, for a conference for example. However, for a paper abstract you should give the reader enough information so they can decide if they want to read the full paper. Basically, you should treat the abstract as an advert for your work. There are 5 key sentences that should be in your abstract. First, an introduction. You can use this to provide some background, but be sure to be concise. You can expand on this in your paper. You want to state the problem and what your key research question is. You then want to show the gap in the literature or in the research to basically summarize why no one else has answered that question yet. If you can, you should describe in one sentence what methodology and methods you used. You don't have to go into too much detail in your abstract, but you just want to make sure that the reader knows if it was a qualitative study or a quantitative study, if it was a lab-based experiment, or was it fieldwork? And then you want to close your abstract with the key impact of your research. So for example, what is a key conclusion? What are your implications? What's the primary take-home message? I will link to an abstract template within the description of this video. However, if you do not want to use the template, here are some top tips that help you write your abstract. First, you can start by copying the first sentence from each section of your paper. Then you can add the final conclusion sentence from your paper. And then go back and see what parts of the 5 key sentences are still missing and add those. If you think there's any other information necessary, add those, but make sure to stay within the word limit. When writing your abstract, make sure that you do not add any new information, which is why I recommend that you write your abstract at the end. The abstract normally doesn't contain references, so make sure everything is paraphrased. Also make sure that you don't have too much information in your abstract. You want it to be concise, so the reader can decide quickly if this paper is what they're looking for. And unless you're working on a graphical abstract, there shouldn't be any images or illustrations within your abstract. If possible, try to stick to one paragraph, around 300 words. But it is worthwhile to check if your journal has different requirements. Sometimes you might be limited to 200 words, or maybe the journal gives you a little bit more words to play with. Follow the introduction, body, conclusion structure for your abstract, similarly to the way you have written your paper. Make sure the abstract is a good representation of your paper and it can be understood without needing to read the full paper, because this will help the reader to make a decision. And make sure your abstract is a concise and accurate summary of your paper, which is again why I recommend you write the abstract at the end. So let's look at some of the papers we have been using throughout this video series. Here we'll be looking at context and background, the problem, the main message, results, and the broader perspective or impact. So for our first example, the researching healthcare paper, we can see that quite a few of the things we are looking for are covered within this abstract. So they provide the background, saying how this research is crucial in providing justification for other research findings. They state the problem, saying that qualitative research in healthcare, including those who conduct phenomenological research, are usually fairly modest when it comes to qualifying their research findings. Then their main message: we advocate a view of evidence for phenomenological research. And then they state how they're going to approach that. Then they cover the broader perspective, where they are suggesting that phenomenology can become an exemplar of how qualitative research can make convincing arguments. And then they share some of their initial results by saying, in this article we present a philosophical foundation for phenomenological evidence by exploring the notions of objectivity, validity, and generalization. This is quite a good abstract. However, if we go back to the paper, their final sentence was a bit broader and showed a little bit more impact, and I think they could have copied this into this abstract. And this sentence was, recognizing these aspects will contribute to robust qualitative research that has the potential to provide qualitative evidence, which is crucial and indispensable for practice and policy. This is a much stronger statement from the paper, and I do think this could have found a home within the abstract. Looking at the abstract from the potential formation mechanisms of early diagenetic displacive veins in the Permian-Boda claystone formation, shows us that not all of the aspects you would like to see in an abstract are covered. In fact, they spend the majority of their abstract talking about their results. They do start off with the context and background by showing us that they think this claystone formation is most promising for disposal of high-level radioactive waste in Hungary. And this is a sentence we have seen just as that is within the introduction. They then also state the problem, so saying why it is important to understand this formation, and it links back to the disposal of high-level radioactive waste. And then the rest of the abstract, except the last sentence, is all about the results. They're wasting a little bit of time here, and they could have just hinted at the results, giving a summary, and then we can find out more about the results when we read the paper. They also then add their main message, saying according to this model, compaction pressure solution and elevated pore fluid pressures, seepage forces and the force of crystallization can all play important roles in the formation of these types of veins. However, considering the opening sentence of the abstract saying that this has to do with disposal of high-level radioactive waste, it would have been nice to have a broader perspective sentence at the end referring back to this big question. And lastly, looking at the Athena, Parthenos and Liverpool abstract, we can see that this is a very concise abstract. However, it does contain the key features we expect to see in an abstract. They tell us quite a lot actually about the background and the context, about the terracotta figurine and why they were looking at this and the relationship to other similar figurines. Then they state the problem, that this was previously dated to the Roman period, but they think this might not be correct. They share some of the results, saying actually they found that all three were made from the same mold, and then they show the broader perspective, saying that this might mean that other figurines should be reconsidered. So you can see that an abstract doesn't have to be long to contain the key information. Now let's look a little bit at editing your own work and proofreading your own writing. First up, I want to say that editing is part of your writing. It's part of the process. And this is how we get from a draft to a second draft to a third draft to eventually the final version. So do think about it as a process. Writing and editing, rewriting and re-editing. It can really help with your editing that if you get some distance from your text. So once you have written a section or once you have a first draft, put it away for a little while. A few days, maybe a week. And then go back to your text with fresh eyes. You can also try and change the look of your document, maybe the size, the font, the colour or the spacing to help you not get dragged into your writing, because you will be so familiar with your words. It might help to print it out, for example, or if you have a tablet, maybe you want to read it in a different format on your tablet. You can also try the read aloud function that is built into Word. And that way you can just listen to your writing and just see if, for example, the order makes sense. When you do edit your writing, maybe you want to edit in blocks and focus on certain aspects. For example, you can start by focusing on the content. Maybe you want to have a check of the overall structure. Maybe there are certain paragraphs you're not sure about and you want to check their structure instead. You can then edit for clarity and style to make sure, even if you might have written your abstract or your whole paper at different parts and different times, that kind of your writing style is the same throughout. And then lastly, you might want to check all your references are in place and in order. The first thing to note is that proofreading is not editing. Proofreading should be the last thing you do, and this is when you're really going to check for spelling mistakes, for grammar, punctuation, all of those kind of little itty-bitty things that might get overlooked, especially once you are very familiar with your writing, with your paper. You might overlook these things. First up, when it comes to proofreading, don't rely on spell or grammar checks, even though I know they're getting better and they can be a good starting point. When you are proofreading, try and proofread for one error at a time. So maybe you want to start by checking for common typos. Maybe there are certain words you just keep misspelling. Also have a look for fill words and try and get rid of those. Make sure you take your time when it comes to proofreading, and you can try reading out loud, either yourself or you can use the built-in function in Word. By reading out loud, you slow down, and this makes it more likely for you to catch tiny mistakes. It really helps if you have your spacing double-lined to help with proofreading, or if you can read your writing, your paper, whatever it might be, on paper, printed out, or on a tablet. If you're really struggling to focus on individual words and their spelling or on the grammar, you can try reading backwards. This could be sentence by sentence, or you can just start at the end of your paper and work your way back. And again, keep in mind, proofreading is a process. It will take time. But you can also always ask someone else to help you with your proofreading, and it really helps if they're not familiar with your topic. I make sure I link to some more tips in the description of this video. Thank you for watching Journal Paper Writing Club, Abstract and Final Edit. And make sure you have a look at my website for other writing resources, or a look in the channel for more videos.